Okay, Jose, you can begin.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order. It is 6:18 on September 28th for a Rural Advisory Committee meeting. Here from the committee, we have myself, Jose Conway, we have Councillor Boehm, we have Councillor Usharoff, and we have Allison Shannon. We also have James Thompson, who's the clerk and who will be guiding us throughout when we have procedural question, supported by Elizabeth Fawcett. It's a pleasure to meet you, Elizabeth, even though we don't get to see your face. So tonight, we'd like to start with the approval of the agenda. If there are no questions for the agenda that is set today, can I have someone to move the approval of the agenda? Councillor Usharoff, and seconded by Councillor Boehm. I still have to practice that word. I promised last time I would practice. I didn't practice enough. So all those in favor, raise your hand. All in favors. Confirmation of minutes. Could I have someone to move the approval of the minutes from last time, from last meeting? Councillor Usharoff, seconded by Councillor Boehm. All those in favor? And excellent. The meeting minutes are approved. We can now move forward with any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we can move forward. There are no delegations and there are no briefings tonight, so we can move to the business items. We are very grateful and happy to welcome Craig Desjardins again with us at the Rural Advisory Committee for a presentation. It's a little bit different than the Smart Cities, which was very interesting. So we'll be talking of the Rural Employment Land Strategy and Economic Recovery Plan update. I believe, Craig, that you have a PowerPoint presentation, so I will leave the floor entirely to you.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Conway and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here, as always. Always great to come back to the Rural Advisory Committee. Here tonight, as the report spells out, to speak to you about the Rural Employment Land Strategy. And for the members of the Council, you'll be aware that this is a priority of Council as part of our strategic priorities. And while it was initially delayed because of the pandemic, we are advancing on this project because of the connection and alignment to another project, important project, the development of an integrated economic development strategy, and also the importance of rural economic development for our city. The new economic development strategy will recognize the importance of rural Kingston in the overall strategy and map out recommendations to support the area, and could provide priorities beyond sort of the rural business park, which is one of the drive behind this particular report. And it could include things like broadband connectivity, which we were speaking about at the top of this meeting. The report before you really highlights the project plan and deliverables. I don't want to go into too much detail just with respect to the report. Happy to answer any questions that you might have, but really wanted to have an explanation of what's been going on. Tell you about the extensive data gathering and analysis that has taken place. But most importantly, to really tonight to begin the engagement with the committee, seek their input as part of the strategy development. We've had an opportunity to connect with the councillors on the committee and receive some input. So very grateful for any insights that the public members of the committee might offer us this evening. I'm not sure whether Brandon Forrest has joined us or not. Brandon's a new member of the city team. He's the new Director of Business, Real Estate and the Environment. He's joined us from the Ontario Public Service. Very, very fortunate for us to be joining the City of Kingston. He's the actual owner of the project. Brandon, are you on? I didn't see him join yet. I'm wondering whether he's having technical difficulties. I don't see him on, so I'll just I'll leave it at that. And maybe I was just going to have him introduce our consultant, Laura O'Blennis, from Stiletto Consulting. So maybe I'll just do that. We're very fortunate to have with us Laura from, and actually I think Kathy Wood, I saw her, who's also participating in the engagement on this project. Have them join us this evening and run us through a few slides to again seek your input and thoughts. But maybe before we get into the slides and have Laura sort of lead us through that, share a few pieces of information, wondering if there's any comments or thoughts with respect to the report. Hearing none, perhaps then I'll hand things over to Laura. Laura, so glad you could join us, and I'm sure if Kathy has any comments, she can pipe in as well. So I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Greg. Laura, it's a pleasure to meet you. Just before you start, I can give a little bit of instructions on how we'll go about providing questions and comments. So at the end of the presentation, if I can ask all of the committee members to hold their questions until the end of the presentation, then we'll do the questions from the committee. Then I will ask if any members of the public are attending and have any questions. So James will help and assist us with getting questions from the members of the public. And then afterwards, we will do a round of deliberations from committee members. So that's kind of the 3 steps that will follow after your presentation. So all yours, Laura.
Great. Thank you so much. So good evening, everybody. Thank you, Craig, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening and have the opportunity to chat with you about the rural employment lands. And as Craig indicated, this is to feed into the integrated economic development strategy, which we are working on in partnership with Kingston Economic Development and the City of Kingston, with Craig leading this internally with the team and working very closely with a number of other leadership team members within the City of Kingston. So what we wanted to do today is we really want to have the opportunity to have dialogue and discussion. And so Jose, thank you so much for laying out how this will go through. We've prepared a few slides that we want to just bring you up to speed on a couple of things that we have found as part of the exercise. I'll fill you in a bit on some of the process that we've been going through to give you a bit more context and background information. There's additional information in additional slides that we can certainly have distributed to you in terms of having a bit more information from what we're actually going to cover in the session today, because we really wanted to use the time that we have together, as Craig had mentioned, to start the engagement with others outside of the councillors who, of course, are on the Economic Development Strategy, Economic Development Board, as well as have been part of some other conversations that we've been having with city leadership. And so I guess with that, we'll go right in. I'm not sure if I have the ability to change the slides here. Excellent. So we'll just move to this one. So we'll give you a bit of a snapshot on rural Kingston. And again, there's some additional information that you'll see in the additional slides, but we wanted to, again, use our time to highlight a few quick points. The 2 fully rural census tracts of rural Kingston have a median age of 49.5 years. The median household income in rural Kingston is 45% higher than in urban Kingston, which we think is pretty significant. The rural Kingston workforce is much more likely to be self-employed and work from home. Also very interesting. And I know we were talking earlier about broadband. So obviously that's on our radar and top of mind. A few things to note from an industry complement perspective. The top rural Kingston industries are construction, with 20% of rural businesses being in construction, 11% in retail trade, 9% in professional, scientific, and technical services. These are all based on NAICS codes, by the way, which is the North American Industry Classification Standards. Administrative and support and waste management and remediation services. This is about 9% of rural businesses. And then, of course, other services, which excludes public administration, also at about 9% of businesses. And we can certainly chat about that a little bit further. Again, there's slides to support this. So let's go to the next slide. In terms of where we're at in the inputs and some of the next steps in the process. So we've done a fair amount of stakeholder outreach, one-on-one interviews, which again, Craig highlighted. Kathy Wood is on the call, and we've pulled in Kathy as an associate within our team to be able to help with some of this stakeholder outreach and some of the conversations that we've been lining up with folks in the community. We've done a fairly extensive data collection and analysis looking at business counts, workforce trends, looking a lot at land and availability of land in terms of where the land is clustered, lining it up with your hamlets, which are identified in your official plan, looking at the contiguous areas and plots of lands of more than 50 acres of land, more than 100 acres of land, where you might be able to have some clustered and concentrated development, which we think is quite useful in terms of understanding and identifying recommendations that you may want to consider, that the community may want to consider as we move forward and round out the framework and prepare the overall recommendations as we go forward from here. The land use analysis is basically what I've just highlighted in terms of looking at both the hamlet development areas that have been identified through the official plan, as well as other pockets of development that could occur with larger cluster development for park related activities. We're looking at potential uses next in terms of next steps, looking at the potential uses by hamlet as well as by commercial development with those larger plots of land. What might the appropriate uses be for those areas, taking into account existing industry counts and workforce counts in those areas. We're building out the strategy framework, and we do have 5 components that we're looking at now, and we'll be continuing to flesh out a bit further over the next few weeks. We're engaging in a validation exercise, and we're using the Engage Kingston platform for the integrated strategy. And the survey is actually going to be launching tomorrow. So there's about a dozen questions that we're asking, both around the integrated strategy as well as some of the elements within rural Kingston in particular, around the types of development that may be appealing or of interest to the community. And so that's taking place tomorrow through to October 20th. We're looking forward to receiving some feedback and some inputs that may help to guide potential activities in the areas that we've identified and the high-level recommendations and themes that we're currently looking at and assessing. From there, we'll be pulling together an action plan, and then of course, rounding out the final report and pulling everything together to feed into not only the employment lands strategy for rural Kingston, but also the integrated economic strategy. And we'll go to the next slide. So what we really wanted to chat with you about today, we wanted to use the time and perhaps we can pause. And I know, Jose, in terms of the protocol and process, as we conclude the summary that I'm sharing with you, we will open it up for conversation. But really what we were hoping to get from you in terms of timing and next steps, the rural strategy will be pulled together by the end of October. We've got the data analysis completed, or the data inputs in. We're looking at the analysis right now. As I mentioned, we're rounding out some of the validation and some of the other areas that we want to confirm in terms of directionally where we're at. What we're really hoping to accomplish from the conversation today, and this is actually a question that we're posing in the ideas platform through the Engage Kingston platform. We have the survey for the overall economic strategy, and with several questions in there for rural Kingston as well. And we also have the ideas platform that we're going to be exploring, asking this specific question for rural Kingston. And we thought it would be an excellent segue in getting ready for the launch of this platform tomorrow to really hear from you first in terms of what your thoughts are on your top 3 priorities that should be considered as we look at economic development opportunities in rural Kingston. And with that, I would throw it back over to you, Jose, in terms of navigating and facilitating the discussion. But that's really the question that we have, and happy to entertain any other questions that may be there from the team to walk through either our process, where we're at, or potential next steps.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. Just a question for you, Laura. Do you have more slides, or is this the end of your presentation? Just to know.
Yep, that is the end of the presentation.
Okay,
yep.
Perfect, wonderful. So what I'm going to suggest is I'll take the questions from the committee members from us to you, and then we'll take questions from the members of the public to you, and then we can come back to this very interesting question that you've asked us as part of the discussion and as part of our deliberations.
Excellent.
So hopefully that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
So let's start with questions from the committee members. And I just saw John, welcome. Welcome to the meeting.
Yes, thank you. I apologize. All the emails said 6:30, but clearly I'm late.
No problem. I hope you had a time to read the report that Laura just presented. I don't know if you had a chance to hear a little bit of her presentation. But if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask her. So I'll try to use my eyes and visually look at you and look at the members to know who goes first. Show me your finger if you want to talk. Councillor Usharaf, you're on.
I'm sorry, I've switched over now to my personal iPhone. I'm trying to read, so I'm juggling. I'm hanging on by the thread here. It feels like. So I shouldn't really go first. I do know Laura a little bit from economic development Zooms. I don't want to be the dominant voice here. I have lots to say and lots to do, but I don't want to do that quite yet. So I wanted to make sure we're connected here, really. I'm really interested in the engagement process that they have. I'd like to hear things that they are hearing. As a rural council, I'm probably somewhat responsible for some of this happening, because it's the one line that I've been really intentional about this since from the beginning, and so it's kind of a passion for me to discuss rural economic development and the balance that we would try to achieve in the rural area. And I really want that, in a sense, understood, because we understand now, that we understand. We've always known that we are an asset and in our place in the community, and we are an unrealized potential. But I really want to make sure people don't think that I am pushing something, or council or economic development, that is out of proportion to what is a healthy balance for the rural area. And though we will grapple with that, and we'll listen to stakeholders and what Laura hears, and I've conversations with Kathy Wood, it will be, we're really going to have a fulsome look at this. And again, I had a conversation today. So I think that's really important. So how we develop it, and about sustainability, everyone knows I opposed the development that got passed a few weeks ago because it presented risks to our community. But council's wisdom spoke and said they want to have that kind of development. So we're going to see how we manage it. We're going to talk about transit and whether it can reach certain areas. We're going to talk about broadband, and broadband is so important. And I'm so thankful we're going to have a motion next week about council's support for advancement of broadband services. And we're going to talk about some roads and place where it could and should be, how we would develop a park potentially. So all these things are just, this is a great time to have some, it's a think tank kind of thing too, right? So I'm all for that, and I really want that. I really hope that we can advance the process, and that's what Laura's job is to do, to really, really boil it down to see what we can do and what could be acceptable to our community as well within the official plan, with a new interpretation, kind of provincial policy statement. These are things that are important. So I'll stop for a minute, and hopefully I can hear and listen to other things too, and we can capture the essence of this that's so important. And Laura, that makes sense, right, Laura?
Yep, makes sense on my end. Thanks, Gary. Councillor.
Perfect. So we'll take questions. If I'll give you a few seconds. I don't know if Allison, Councillor Boehm, John, if you have any direct questions for Laura. Yes, Councillor Boehm.
Just had to get unmuted there. Yeah, just on the engagement part, you mentioned that it's going to be starting tomorrow, I believe. Is it just one round of engagement? Because just on that, I find that sometimes the initial round of engagement, I'm sure Councillor Oosterhoff would agree, as well as many other councillors, sometimes the initial round of engagement is more about just raising awareness that the engagement is even happening. So sometimes what will end up happening is the engagement happens and then everybody becomes aware of it kind of after it's closed. So I'm curious if there's an opportunity to do like a second round, because typically the first one just raises awareness about it. And the second one, or after the first round closes, is when people begin to engage, and then it's like, we're sorry, engagement's closed. And that's kind of the danger here with just one round of engagement, I feel, especially on something like this, because with rural residents in particular, I feel that if we truly want buy-in to this plan, we need for them to be the biggest part of it and the driver behind it.
Perfect. I saw, Craig, you have your hand up. I'm not sure if it's to respond directly to Councillor Boehm or if I missed you earlier.
Thank you, Chair. It is to actually address Councillor Boehm, and I think his point is very well taken. Part of the process of engagement, we've actually extended the period. I know we were looking originally at about 2 weeks. We've extended it a whole other week. And we also added this new ideas platform, which gives that's actually something unique for the rural engagement. So beyond the basic, I think there's 14 or 17 questions. Some of them are specific to rural, some are more general, but certainly to recognize, as you said, that it does take time for some to be aware of this opportunity and then to actually participate. We've asked the city's communication department to have a major blitz, which, as I said, will launch tomorrow. We'll be doing some media with that, but also social media posts. So they'll be quite extensive. We'd certainly be very grateful to this committee if you have any contacts. I'm thinking in terms of some of the ratepayers associations, homeowners associations, that we could send out the link to these groups to make sure that the survey gets good coverage in the community.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Craig. Just in follow up to that, some of the criticisms that we kind of often get is, you have the initial engagement, and then there's kind of like something from that, but it never goes back to the community again to sort of like vet what came out of the engagement to see if that's actually what was intended from kind of the community's engagement. So is there, I know we're only going to meet again in December, and this is due sort of an anecdotal, but is there going to be another opportunity to sort of, I guess, not to kick the can down the road and delay this, but to basically say, like, here's everything we've heard. Did we get it right? Does this line up with what people see? So is there going to be that, I guess, that vetting process? Because I know as counselors, that's probably one of the hardest things we deal with is engagement's always tricky, but I think in this instance too, for instance, when it comes to just accessibility to the engagement, if a lot of people feel like the engagement happened and they weren't able to access it, it kind of almost torpedoes the plan right off the bat, regardless of how good it is, right? Because you look at that rural stakeholder buy-in, and if they felt like they couldn't access it at that point, they just tune in, right? So
Councillor, you read our minds 100%. One of the suggestions actually we were going to approach the clerk staff was to perhaps use this committee actually as that sounding board, because they are duly representative and appointed. We were wondering whether there was any appetite or ability to actually have a special meeting. Perhaps after the survey closes, we can consolidate some of that information and present a little bit more. It was pretty thin, and for a very good reason. We don't have a lot of time this evening, but maybe present a little bit more data, a little bit more information on sort of what we're finding, what people are saying, and allow this group to be that sounding board if there is interest on this group's part.
Yeah, I believe the chair can call us.
Yes, exactly. So certainly we can be in touch to see the timeline that you're operating with and call a special meeting to continue this conversation. I personally believe that this is of deep interest for the Rural Advisory Committee. Seeing the nods around the cameras, I think that there's certainly a lot of interest for this. So hopefully we can pursue the conversation on this. I see, Allison, your hand was raised, so I believe you have a question to ask as well. Oh, you're on mute. I don't know if we can unmute you from our end.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, so it's just to emphasize again what Councillor Boehm was saying, and it's important that we hear from more than one voice, that it has to be, and that's good news, if after the initial outreach that's supposed to be finished by October 20th comes back to somebody, and if that sounding board is the Rural Advisory Committee, I would say that's that's great. And we'll do our best to reach out to the channels that we're at. This is far too important to think that we can accomplish good consultation in 3 weeks. There's no way. We have to be realistic because we're also dealing with a different audience. The rural community is very different than the city, and how they like to do business and how they like to be communicated with. And I think we need to be very, very careful that we have as inclusive and well-rounded conversation as possible. And that is going to take a little bit of time. So hopefully you hear us, that it's very important that we need more than just 3 weeks on something that is of profound importance to our community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Allison, for making that point. I also believe that the situation is severely exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, of which I don't really know for a fact, but I would have the impression that it disproportionately affects rural businesses just by de facto and by some of the measures put in place with shopping and farmers markets and a lot of things this summer that would have been interrupted due to our measures. So certainly a lot of interest here to push this forward. Craig, I see your hand. I believe it's to respond to Allison's point. So I'll let you speak up.
Thank you very much, Chair Conway. Yes, absolutely. I think we've heard your message very clear, and we'll work with staff and work with the chair to call another meeting to sort of present some of the comments and seek additional input from this group.
Excellent. I do have a question myself before we move to questions from members of the public. So my question is from the section of the report on financial considerations. It is mentioned that it has not been fully costed and have not been budgeted for within the city's budget, capital budget. Do you foresee any hurdles and challenges with that? Is there something that you feel might be interrupted due to the lack of financial commitment? Where is that going in terms of those challenges?
That's a good question, Chair Conway. I'll let the councillors make some comments after I make a comment, but certainly the financial situation is of concern right now, given the pandemic, the impacts the pandemic have had on city finances. That being said, there are resources. We do have budgeting, and we have capital budgeting processes going forward. Budget deliberations will be in early in the new year. We're starting work on preparing of city budgets. We're also very active. Part of my office is responsible for sourcing grant funding from other levels of government and other organizations. We are keenly aware that will play a very important role in some of the projects that we're exploring. So you certainly have my commitment to be looking for opportunities for grant dollars for special projects that might be identified as part of the strategy.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that. John, I see your hand. Please. All yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Craig. Those are excellent points that lead into what I wanted to raise. So as the member for agriculture on this committee, it's always frustrating being in a urban center that has a vast agricultural area, because there's a series of organizations out there called the Community Futures Development Corporations, the CFDCs, and they are targeted at supporting rural businesses. But being inside the Kingston municipal limits, we are cut off from that. There was actually a targeted business funding grant delivered through the CFDCs intended to support agribusinesses like mine, because I did need to hire another worker because I was so swamped myself, but I couldn't get that funding because I'm inside Kingston. So in terms of looking at costs, the money's out there, and just in terms of developing partnerships with the entities that are already funneling that money, Kingston can probably get benefit at zero cost to ourselves. The CFDCs are aware of this issue and they would love to help, but they've only got so much horsepower themselves. My other thought is that I'm always concerned that business development strategies, and this is just a general comment, business development strategies for the rural area are very urban centric. And I get concerned that we don't necessarily end up with rural businesses. We just end up with dispersed urban businesses, which are different things. And I've said it before, one of the fundamental rural business is agribusiness. And Kingston, related to the CFDC concept, has a fair bit of prime agricultural land left that is not supported by the conventional agricultural support agencies, but is vulnerable to development by virtue of the fact that it's within municipal boundaries. A great example is the recent establishment of that Chinese milk processing factory. The name escapes me right now, but I know they're trying to do goat milk. And of little surprise to those of us in the legal community, an obstacle to the economic success of that business is the use of prison labor. Those of us who are familiar with international trade law saw it coming a mile away, but it only really became an issue once they actually started getting operational. So I think that we should really take a hard look at where the agribusiness opportunities are. They're generally less infrastructure intensive than urban businesses and dovetail naturally with what's already there. Thank you.
Great comments, John. I'm very familiar with the CFDCs. Actually, I was a executive director before I joined the city of Kingston down in Prince Edward County. So very familiar with the programming that they have. Certainly, there's a lot of really great lessons to learn in our surrounding communities, Prince Edward County, Lennox, Nannington, Northumberland, with the artisan food and artisan agricultural food opportunities. And certainly that would tie in very nicely with the discussions that took place last week at council about food security and how do we use the incredible lands we do have to address some issues of food security, but also incredible economic development opportunities. So I think one of the reasons why we're pushing a rural economic development focus is to identify just these very programs. I know one that we were looking at a couple of years ago was around the issue of succession. And I know the Farm Credit Canada has done some extraordinary work with respect to succession planning for rural agricultural businesses, but that could extend to succession issues for other rural businesses. So again, lots to learn and lots of best practices to share with our neighbors and colleagues.
It's a very, very interesting and in-depth conversation. I think it's very fruitful. Just want to turn to James to know if there are any questions from members of the public at this time.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. There are 3 members of the public who are in attendance. I would just like to remind them that if they wish to speak, they need to use the raise hand tool within Zoom. To use that tool, I'll just go over that again quickly. If you click on the participants icon in the lower menu on the screen, that will load a list of participants on the right-hand side of your screen. At the bottom of that section, there is a little button that says raise hand. So if you do wish to speak, I'd like you to press that button in the next few seconds if that's possible. Thank you.
Excellent. As we wait and give a moment to members of the public to raise their hands if they have questions, I believe that there's a lot of merit and a lot of interesting outcome that can come from this assessment and from this study that is being conducted for the Rural Advisory Committee. So coming back to us, I believe, is extremely beneficial, not only for the vetting process of the rounds of engagement, as well as the survey, and to hear more about where it's going, but also in terms of tying some of the findings with our work plan for next year, because we operate on an annual work plan. I see a lot of opportunities to take lessons and learn from the findings and from the consultations on what members of the public are saying in the rural area. So certainly, I think there's a lot of efforts there to be made. I'm seeing no hands being raised at this time.
Sorry, Madam Chair, someone just did raise their hand, so we'll turn to Tim Hammond, who has been unmuted once they accept the request to unmute their microphone. and they're able to pose their questions for up to 5 minutes. And I believe their mic is now live, so please go ahead, sir.
Oh, well, good evening, everyone.
Hi.
So my question just has to do with it. Unfortunately, like John, there was some confusion on when the time started, so I missed the very first part of the presentation. In the executive summary, it mentions the establishment of rural business parks. So my question is, are we looking broader than that, or is it just we're looking at establishing rural business parks?
So thank you very much. That's a very good question, and absolutely yes. The motion and the priority that was set by council specifically referenced a business park. But given that we're in the process of developing an integrated economic development strategy, it was felt that it was critically important to sort of go beyond that and to really look at this as an opportunity to conduct a rural economic development broader strategy. I think also, the serious implications for the community caused by the pandemic really warranted us to look at also how do we recover from the pandemic from an economic perspective, and with a rural lens on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Hammond. Do we have any other questions from members of the public?
I don't believe so, Madam Chair, so perhaps we can move on to comments.
Excellent. So now deliberations. I believe we can address the question that was asked of us. What are the top 3 priorities that should be considered for economic development opportunities? I think, John, you touched on a few of those possible priorities or areas of exploration. Councillor Usharov also already touched on a few of them, mentioning broadband, transit, and sustainability. Is there anything you wish to add at this time? John, please go.
I would like to make a more tangible proposal, which is something that's been on the menu for the former Pittsburgh Township for, as far as I know, since they merged. That is the relocation of the Kingston Fairground. In the middle of the city, it seems to no longer be fire safe. And once upon a time, I believe the concept was that it would move to Grass Creek Park. However, I think there's probably lots of places that have good commuting or good transportation access where that would kind of just be a natural business park for the rural area.
Thank you. That's an excellent point, and I think it can give a lot of food for thoughts to the team. Okay, seeing no other interest to speak, I believe we can conclude this matter and move on. I see 2 actions moving forward. We will be in touch with Craig and Craig's team to know what the outcomes of the engagement, the survey is, and what timeline to operate on to see the need to maybe call a special meeting to bring this back to the Rural Advisory Committee as a tool of vetting the findings and finding ways to possibly see if there's areas of priority for maybe the next year's annual plan of the Rural Advisory Committee, as well as interest to support finding grant and funding opportunities to move this forward, because I believe that it's an extremely important project. I'm not sure, and this, James, I'm looking at you, although you to know if this requires a motion. So really looking for staff support here to know what is the best way forward.
No motion is required. We'll be happy to work with both you and Craig to arrange a special meeting at the appropriate time.
Excellent. Wonderful. So if nothing is needed at this time of the Rural Advisory Committee meeting, we can move on to the next business item. So thank you, Craig, for being with us, and thank you, Laura, for your very eloquent presentation. We really appreciated your presence today and your patience as we got started tonight.
No problem. Thank you for the invitation, and we'll look forward to the follow-up discussion to come. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Okay. So the next business item is the open air burning proposal. I'm not sure if it's going to be presented by Chief Posadowski. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Actually, Madam Chair, if I could.
Chief Armstrong.
Chief Armstrong? Okay, wonderful.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Oh, that's great. It's great to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the Rural Advisory Committee. I'm joined this evening with Deputy Chief Kevin Donaldson, and also in attendance is Chief Fire Prevention Officer Ted Posadowski. They're going to provide a brief summary of some changes we made to open air burning, and it's our desire to present these changes in a way that'll make it more clear for people when they're considering open air burning in the community. Also striking a balance between a very emotive issue between those who wish to burn and those who don't want burning. And so we hope we've struck a balance, and we've just concluded a Get Involved Kingston session where we will summarize the findings for a report to council coming up in October. So without further delay, I think I'll pass it over to Deputy Chief Kevin Donaldson and Chief Fire Prevention Officer Ted Posadowski. Go ahead, Kevin.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having us tonight to talk to you about our open air policy and discuss the policy and the bylaw that we'd like to present to council. So open air burning is defined as any fire or burning practice that's conducted outside of a building, including but not limited to bonfires, fires in burn barrels, and outdoor recreational appliances. In the province of Ontario, the Fire Protection and Prevention Act provides authority to the fire chief of a municipality to establish a bylaw with the approval of council that governs open air burning. Currently, Kingston and Fire Rescue has an internal guideline regulating open air burning within the city of Kingston. And beyond the framework within the Ontario Fire Code, there's not a policy or bylaw to effectively regulate compliance of the open air burning across the city of Kingston. We'll go to the next slide, please. Sorry, we'll go to the next slide, please. So in the chart that's up now, you can see that since 2014, Kingston Fire and Rescue has witnessed a steady increase in calls surrounding open air burning and unsafe open air burning practices. We've already exceeded year to date 250 calls, which signifies an approximate 70% increase in responses to open air burning since 2014. So you can see a steady rise, and it's increasing rapidly. To improve customer service with the implementation of an open air policy and burning bylaw, the implementation would enhance community safety for the residents of the city of Kingston and clarify the requirements of open air burning. The guideline that Kingston Fire and Rescue, the internal guideline that we have now, it's unclear. The Kingston Fire and Rescue, the guideline, leads to confusion and conflict amongst neighbors, and sometimes it puts responders in the middle of the disputes. Sorry, next slide, please. With regard to the climate emergency, the University of Waterloo provided a formula that determines the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted by one vehicle idling, depending on what's being used from the vehicle. And with one truck responses within the city of Kingston between January 1st, 2014 and September 14th, 2020, we were able to determine that 707 kilograms of greenhouse gases were emitted as a result of responding to open air burning complaints. Now, keep in mind that in rural areas, we generally require a multi-vehicle response to incidents. And an example is 2 pumpers and 2 tankers would respond to a burn complaint in a rural area, and that's dependent on the availability of the volunteer responders. In the urban areas is typically a 1-truck response to a burn complaint. And we'll go to the next slide, please. On the map, you'll see there's a red zone and a yellow zone, and these zones are consistent with the current guidelines that Kingston Fire and Rescue has for open air burning. So it adds the proposed bylaw would add flexibility to the red zone with regards to agricultural and brush fires. So you see the fires permitted would be agricultural, brush, approved appliances, campfires, ceremonial fires, and campgrounds. The yellow zone would be the fires permitted would be approved appliances and ceremonial fires. We'll go to the next slide, please. So this chart shows the type of burning that would be allowed. The current allowances are the sizes of the fire allowed. Current distance is the setbacks from other combustibles, property lines, fences, and other burning materials, other materials that burn. And then the proposed next column is the proposed allowances. And then the final column is the proposed distances.
Do you mind if I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sure.
I see Chief Armstrong with your hand being raised. Did you want to interject in the presentation? Just wanted to give you the opportunity to jump in if that's your intent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add to Kevin's comments, people are going to wonder, so what's changed? So previously, the requirement was in the rural area, people were to call in prior to burning. Now, if you did call in, that was great and much appreciated. What's happening now is we're going to be proposing that you call in once per year prior to burning, and you'll be filling out a permit on the city's website. So that's a change, and we're also looking at expanding the size of fires based on a risk management situation between the criteria in the rural area versus the urban area. So those were kind of 2 points I wanted to highlight. And thanks, Kevin. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. Kevin, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, you'll see with the in the brush and agricultural on the current slide, you'll see it's not applicable. So in currently fires were limited to 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter in the red zone or the current north zone. And the proposed allowances would be for brush, you'd be allowed a 3 meter by 3 meter by 3 meter fire, and agricultural would be 6 meter by 6 meter by 6 meter. We'll go to the next slide, please. So the next slide shows the yellow area on the previous slide with the map. And there's approved appliances as well, and this is as there was in the north. And the current distance of approved appliances from any other combustible materials, property lines, et cetera, was 3 meters. And we're proposing that be moved to 5 meters to add an extra safety zone around the approved appliance. We'll go to the next slide, please. So as Chief Armstrong mentioned, we're proposing that all open air burning will require annual authorization prior to burning in the form of a permit. And also on the permit, the individual that is present and in control of the open air burn must be the individual applied identified on the open air burn permit. Also, that person must have necessary means to extinguish a fire, limit its spread, and summon Kingston Fire and Rescue. They must have that readily available at all authorized burn locations. So that this would help to expedite enforcement actions and to assist fire inspectors with their service deliveries. And the permit would provide clear guidelines along with the bylaw to the people that are applying to be able to burn. And next slide, please. If we would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Councillor Boehm, I see your hand. You may speak.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Chief, I was just wondering there, you mentioned that it has to be the person that's on the permit. So I'm just curious if there's been any consideration to if there's, for instance, a couple that live on a farm, and it could be either one of them that wants to have the brush or whatever. Is there any possibility to look into possibly having two people authorized on the same permit as long as it's for the same property? And because I'm assuming there's also a cost as well, or would they have to each take out a permit? I'm just trying to understand that process a little bit more.
So I can take that. That's certainly something we'll consider, Councillor Bowman. In terms of the public engagement, we will be summarizing that in the council report. We heard loud and clear that the community was fine with a permit, but they weren't fine with a fee related to the permit. So what we're proposing is probably just to look at the permit system without a fee and see what the experience is in the first year in terms of administrative burden, if any, and we'll review it again in a year.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chief. Yeah, I know the community will be very, very happy to hear that, because I know there was a lot of concerns that came up during some of the engagement around the cost side of it and how that would play out, urban versus rural and things like that. So that's great feedback. Thanks, Chief.
Councillor Usharoff, I believe I saw you raising your hand earlier. Yes, you may speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an awkward night for me trying to communicate. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan, for that question. And maybe I'm going to ask for the reply again, because that might relieve. I definitely received some calls of stress from my community and constituents. And I really want to be part of the process. I should have went to get involved, Kingston. I didn't. And yet I'm feeling a little less stressed about it. I think that I appreciate that this might be a precedent, and Councillor Bohm might recognize that you have a north zone and a south zone. How refreshing! Maybe it's hey Ryan, maybe it's a new beginning, that people understand that the rural community experiences these bylaws differently, and so I want to really tip my hat to the fire team we have here today. Forgive me for not saying all your names, but I really respect what you're doing. So any comments I make are within complete respect of what you do and what you know. And let's be clear about that. I actually went out today to our little fire pit in our yard, which I think about nine of my neighbors all have, and we call each other every now and then and have a little get-togethers. And I found 60 by 60 very tiny. I'm not sure what 60 centimeters is. I should, being a contractor. Is that 2 feet? Does anybody know?
Yes, that's approximately 2 feet. Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, mine's 27 inches. The campgrounds, are those, many of them use those rims. I think that might be 60 centimeters or right close to that. Those are going to be acceptable then for campgrounds?
I'll pass on to Chief Fire Prevention Officer Ted Pozadowski.
That would be something we would have to take into consideration based on the feedback.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, well, that would be nice.
If I can
continue very well.
if
Some
I
of my
could jump in.
constituents. Yep.
Just to add to Ted's comments, Councillor Oosterhoff, we probably won't be going out with a tape measure and checking the things. Obviously, our responses into the community, both in the rural and urban parts of Kingston, our area of responsibility, will often be complaint-based. And as I said at the opening comments, it's a very emotive issue, and it's generally not going to touch on people that are respectful of their neighbor's property. So we're really looking at this as a way to strike a balance and also bring some clarity to the community and what's really allowed. So when you're taking out the permit online, you can understand what the requirements are and kind of guide yourself accordingly.
Okay. So is that just so I I'm talking about the the average rural home residents. So you're saying what's coming, you're proposing in the bylaw is that everyone with a backyard fire pit would register and once a year, and at this time there is no cost for that?
That's correct, Councillor Oosterhoff. That's what we're proposing. And when we took part in the Get Involved Kingston, we were really considerate of what we were going to get in terms of feedback. So we've taken that feedback and we will incorporate it into the final recommendation going to council, and also making sure that, as I said earlier, before it was our expectation, and I'm not sure it always got followed, that people in the North Zone were to call in prior to having each and every fire. Now, we know that wasn't probably happening. So we understand that this also gives us an opportunity for the community member to understand by logging onto the website, accessing the permit application, and there'll be a series of questions that will help. And that's all we'll really want annually, so that people understand what the safety measures are, keep themselves safe and keep their neighbors safe also, both in their own life safety and the property around them.
If I may continue on that vein, sorry, Councillor Oosterhoff, I'm not sure if you were finished, but just to continue specifically and dig it a little bit on that. So the dimensions were determined based on public consultations feedback, not based on best practices or on evidence pertaining to occupational health and safety, for example. They were entirely based on feedback?
No, we didn't get the feedback on the exact dimensions. We took that in terms of our own risk management practices and our exposures in the area and our experiences with fires. Perfect. So that's how we came back. But we did receive some comments about the 60 centimeter measurement for a campfire. So we did incorporate that into our report.
Yeah, okay. And so make sure you can hear me there still, sorry. Just want to think about this for a minute. So I see that agricultural, I just want to make sure I have a complete understanding of this based on the calls and the concerns that I have received.
Councillor Oosterhoff, if you don't mind me interjecting, just before we move on to another question on another topic, I see two hands raised by Councillor Bowen and Allison. I just want to know if it's pertaining to this specific subject before we move on to the next theme of questions. So do you want to speak of the dimensions? Say yay.
Are we just talking about that?
Perfect. So I'll continue. Councillor Oosterhoff, you can continue to speak. I just wanted to make sure that we can address this specific matter and not have to come back and throughout the conversation. So I'll let you finish your questions and then move on to Councillor Bowen and then Allison.
Well, I may not be able to ask all my questions. I will consult with the fire chief on my own as well and hear a little bit more about some of the feedback they receive, if that's possible. I have one rural resident with, I think he's zoned agricultural. I think what we're talking about is he was concerned about was the unnecessary complaints and the cost that this must be of implementing a bylaw like this. And so are we thinking that with bringing clarity and, confinement and showing an education, which I really will support more than bylaws. Education is critical. Are we thinking that it's going to lower the unnecessary? Must be very frustrating for the fire departments, our volunteer firefighters, for the numerous unnecessary calls. Like, is it numerous? Can you paint the picture a little bit of what you are experiencing and in our area? Would you say it's too high? What are you experiencing that way presently in the past 12 months then?
So in the rural area, specifically, Councillor Oosterhoff, it's not a pressing where we're being called daily to complaints of burning. But and to your earlier point, we do wish to use this permit process also as an opportunity to educate. And then when people are educated and conduct the fire open air burning safely, I don't think the community would have a problem with that. It's just the bylaw would kick in when somebody that has complete disregard for the safety of others or themselves, then we would get involved. Also, part of it is the issue about the prevalence of cell phones, especially in a rural area. If somebody sees a fire and they don't exactly know where it is, we're being called out to that situation. And they might call it in as an open air burning complaint, but it could actually be a structure fire. So that's why we have to send the complement of staff that we're sending, because oftentimes we just don't know. And then we get there and generally we find out that it's a large party, it's not being conducted safely, and then firefighters are left trying to figure out what to do next in terms of getting that fire under control. So that's when the fire code kicks in and it becomes a not approved fire. And we just thought that the bylaw will help drop that down into the municipal concept, and we can add some guidelines in detail, and then the bylaw will support the fire chief's approval of open air burning in the community.
Yes, thank you for that. What do you know from other municipalities? Where are we headed if there was an annual cost permit for backyard campfires, like or fire burns, like for there will ultimately be a merge to an actual permit. Where do you think that would be for a year? What kind of costs are we anticipating, or do you know what Kitchener or Loyalist? Do you have any other examples?
It really runs the gamut from $5 in a rural area to up to $75 in larger urban areas. But we don't anticipate a fee, as I said to Councillor Bohm initially. In our first year, we'd like to see what the administrative labor is on both the technology as we leverage that, and also staff time to go out, and if there is an inspection needed. Not everybody, some people would say this fire's okay. It's been beside my house. I've been doing it there forever, and it might not be okay with the adjacent neighbor. And that concern is giving that neighbor lots of concern. So that's ultimately what happens, is we end up at those disputes about what's safe and what isn't. So we hope that the guidelines will provide some clarity to the community, and that if there's any confusion or discrepancy on what those guidelines are, we're happy to go out and assist the community in finding out the best way to have a safe fire.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I really, really appreciate that you've acknowledged the education. I think that's really what the rural community does have a handle on that. The rural, we know how to, I can't imagine that there's that many situations because of that. Someone else phoned me and said, what about the fire ban due to drought? Now that's a blanket then, isn't it? That's right. That's a whole different situation. That's a declaration on your part.
That's right. And we want to be flexible within the bylaw. There will be times where there'll be fire bans based on the relative humidity and the dryness in the area. And then there will be other issues where there may be a special event that the fire chief may give a special exemption based on a situation, say that Tourism Kingston or downtown city is doing in terms of promotion, and we will have those inspected. We know that those types of events are supervised. We know that there's staff on hand, and we know that people are trained to look after that. So there'll be definitely flexibility within the bylaw. The rural area, as you've noted, is not a huge concern. We really think that what is going to be a benefit to the rural area in this new proposal is that there isn't that expectation that they call in every time they want to have a fire. They go and they provide some assurances that they're doing it safely. It's going to be acknowledged. It's going to be, the permit will be issued, and they'll be able to, maintain their properties, have those types of fires that you referenced earlier with their neighbors, and it'll be done in a safe way, and it's considerate of everybody. And we hope that through this new policy that will improve responder safety, will improve the safety, most importantly, of our community residents and their properties, and that we'll have some clarity listed on in a way that's consistent across the area of responsibility.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Bowen, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it kind of got touched on a couple of times. Councilor Oosterhoff's questions, but I just wanted to just verify. So really this is about kind of education first. I know when bylaws come out, sometimes people see them as a punitive measure. By the sounds of it, with what I'm hearing tonight, Chief, this is actually about rewarding responsible citizens with the ability to call in once a year, follow the appropriate guidelines that they're going to be educated on, and they've also provided feedback on, and basically almost free them in a sense from having to call in every single time they want to have a fire, provided that it is safe to do so and they follow those guidelines. And then they kind of call in, get that permit, and then they're sort of free to take that responsibility on themselves, which should help reduce the strain on some of the fire resources, and at the same time basically provide more clarity and to the actual bylaw itself, because I know there is some confusion out in the public right now as, what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do. So the idea is education first, review in a year, take that feedback, incorporate it, and kind of sort of solidify it after 1 year's time to see what worked and create that. It's almost like a year-long engagement process. Is that accurate?
Yeah, save and accept there will be a bylaw proposed that will be, effective. We anticipate if approved in 2021. But to answer your earlier comment, today, September 2020, no fires are actually allowed in the city of Kingston. It's actually prohibited under the Ontario Fire Code. So what we were hoping to do is provide that clarity on what is approved by the chief fire official so that people can have that, because we, again, it's a very emotive issue. We found ourselves between adjacent neighbors, and the ultimate answer is that fire is not approved, and then they have to put it out. So we don't want to be the complete fun spoilers, but we certainly want to have risk manage this issue so that it's done safely in the community.
Perfect. Thank you. Sounds like the homework's been done on this and the community's been engaged, and some of that feedback's definitely been incorporated. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Allison, your turn.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question for Chief Armstrong or Deputy Chief Donaldson really pertains more to agricultural applications. Is it my understanding from a previous slide that there is, I'm specifically addressing the question of the size of burn as it would pertain to possibly agricultural uses in the rural part of the township. Was there no previous allowance, and now there is an allowance if it's an agricultural burn of 6 meters by 6 meters by 6 meters, so a little under 20 feet? Is that a new proposed size of burn that didn't exist before? And the reason I ask, if I can just put that in context, if a farmer is looking to improve his or her land, take out a fence, that could lead to perhaps making improvements. if in fact it's a 6 meter by 6 meter by 6 meter size, that's not all that large, which may mean that more burns would have to be done, which could, you know, successive burns in order to get the job done, because 6 meters is just under 20 feet, right? About 20 feet in size. So I just want a little bit of clarification on that, because when it comes to that kind of application for farmers specifically, that doesn't give them, that could precipitate more problems, and hence, you know, could probably lead to more complaints by neighbors simply by virtue of the way things have to be done.
So I'll pass it over to Ted, but I can tell you that there will be flexibility within the bylaw to have an inspection of a burn that might exceed a size. But Ted can provide clarity on the previous size that we were allowing on the unapproved policy, for lack of a better term, and now the proposed policy that we're seeking approval on. So Ted, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chief. Yes, so currently all that's permitted in the north zone is a fire that's 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Okay. So one of the, I guess, concerns or items that were brought forward over the years is the lack of consistency between the other fire departments within KFL&A. So this will align us with, I'm going to use Loyalist Township and Napanee, that currently have 6 meters by 6 meters by 6 meters. Okay. So you'll see that consistency there. Yeah. In order to have an agricultural fire, you'll have to be means like a farming business is defined by the Farming Registration and Farming Organizational Funding Act. So you have to meet that to actually have the agricultural. But so with that in mind, we wanted to, that's why we have that brush fire option. So you have that 3 meter by 3 meter by 3 meter. We were just finding out there that the 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter wasn't large enough. So it's all about flexibility, and so that's kind of the background, and just big thing, consistency with their neighboring departments throughout KFL&A. So we're consistent with that.
Just to supplement, can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah. Just to reinforce as well, just the size of the burn. So perhaps is the bylaw going to say that there needs to be inspection on site? Because I just think you're going to have more burns if you're going to limit the size, possibly depending on the application, which could require more resources.
Yep. So we can we will consider that, and we'd like to keep it at 6 meters by 6 meters by 6 meters, but we will provide some flexibility within the language of the bylaw as it gets developed to consider any requests for exceptions, and those requests for an exceptional sized fire could be inspected by our staff, and we're happy to do that. We'd rather go out and make sure it's done safely than to have somebody attempt to do that and have it get out of control on them.
Okay, thanks. That's great.
Thank you. John, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 questions, actually. So with any new bylaw, there's a question of enforcement. So in terms of the draft, are we looking at giving firefighters the power to issue tickets or lay fines if there's a violation of this new bylaw? And is it expected to include anything about materials?
So we will certainly have a provision in the bylaw to have our fire inspectors, their POA officers under the Provincial Offences Act, and they can now lay charges under that section. And we haven't decided whether we're actually going to drop that down to the company officer writing a ticket. We think we'd like to rather have the situation made safe and then go back and consider the situation and move carefully on whether somebody's going to be charged. Obviously, we're an agency that seeks compliance first before we go to that extreme level of bringing somebody into a provincial offences court. But if we did have somebody that just outright refused to follow the guidelines and just went ahead and did something that we deemed to be very unsafe, then we would lay charges.
my other question was about the materials.
So obviously we want Class A materials to be burnt, and obviously we don't want people burning garbage, rubber, plastics, things like that. We are in a climate emergency, and those don't help with the climate crisis that we're undergoing. So I think the bylaw will spell out the types of fire that can be had as an open air situation. And obviously in the south zone, we're recommending an approved appliance that burns either natural gas or propane.
Thank you.
So considering the number of questions we have raised, over 30 minutes of questions, sorry for all those questions. I'm wondering if there would be value in seeing this proposed bylaw, because there's a lot of questions that have rose from that before it goes to council, so that we can look at it more from that rural lens. Allison, you brought excellent points. I think there's possibly merit of doing that. Just wondering if this is a possibility, and from city staff, what that could look like. If a motion might be required, what the timeline looks on that.
So I actually haven't seen the draft bylaw yet. Obviously the recommendation going to council would be to develop a bylaw, and we're certainly happy to engage as we're developing that bylaw. We're projecting that January 1, we would like this to take effect, although we don't have too many open air fires in January. But in case somebody did want to burn brush, it's not a bad time to do that. However, we certainly would be developing the bylaw and bringing that back for approval.
Excellent. So we do have your commitment of coming back to us with this proposed bylaw if accepted by council. So if council moves forward with accepting the allocation of resources to develop this bylaw, that we would have a chance at the Rural Advisory Committee to have our eyes on it before it goes to be approved officially by council. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, if that's the recommendation is to develop a bylaw, recommend the new proposed guidelines for open air burning, and to develop a bylaw to support the enforcement of those guidelines, we'd certainly be happy to engage on that level.
Okay, so before we settle on that, I do want to provide the opportunity for members of the public to ask questions. I did receive an email from a member of the public, and I just want to notify you that it'll be coming your way. The question is not exactly pertaining to the bylaw, so I'll leave it aside for now, just because it's not necessarily part of the conversation we're having right now. But we'll send you the chief department. We'll send the email your way so that you get to address it by email. James, do we have any members of the public having a burning desire to ask a question? Pun intended.
Burning desire, good one.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll just ask the members of the public, there's 3 of them present. If any of them wish to speak, they can just use the raise hand tool within Zoom, and we'd be happy to hear from them.
Perfect.
Madam Chair, it does not appear at this time that anyone wishes to speak, so I'll return the chair to you.
Excellent, thank you. So I believe that no motions is required, because we do have a clear action plan for this moving forward, provided the decision and the recommendations made at council in the October meeting. So I believe we can table this conversation for now and resume it at a later time based on the progress that's being done. So thank you for being with us today. I don't know if members of the public, members of the committee, if you have anything to add as part of the deliberations component on this. Seeing none, I believe this concludes the section for the business, and it concludes this open air burning proposal conversation. So thank you for being with us and presenting this today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So moving forward, there were no motions, no notices of motions, no other business, no correspondences. So we get to skip all the way to number 12 of the agenda, to the date and time of the next meeting. The next meeting of the Rural Advisory Committee is scheduled for Monday, December 7th, 2020. So mark your agenda. It will most likely be through an online platform. Just not knowing exactly the situation with the COVID pandemic, it is safe to assume that, that we will be meeting virtually again at that time. Do we need to vote on this? Or Councillor Schroff? You're on mute.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
Yes, please do.
I'm just wondering if it would be better to have the meeting in November. I don't know, I guess the clerk decides that, just to give us, especially with this fire, if we're going to see the, the proposal. I'm not sure when it's going to come before council. We really won't have a chance to input. I would really encourage Allison, if you're listening, some of the concerns from the agricultural industry, if there's more input, to get involved with that for the Chief Armstrong and Donaldson and Pozadowski. I think that this is, we could know it, but I'm just wondering if it's better to move it up a couple of weeks so that we have only one council meeting in December. Those two. I'm just looking at my calendar over. So I don't know. Councillor Ball, are you?
We do have, yes, we do have the opportunity of calling a special meeting if required, and that is something we were discussing about with Craig Desjardins' team, just because of the timeline on how the puzzle pieces are moving. So possibly,
yeah, we might. Those are two.
These
are very. Thank you. These are very important issues that the rural community is. Both of these are wanting to be involved on. So I'll leave that to you, Madam Chair, and to discussion with all of us if we need to have. I think we might need to have a meeting in November, but I'm just thinking out loud with you.
Perfect. Excellent. That definitely will keep our finger on the pulse of the timelines on this so that we can react promptly, asking the committee members to respond to the emails when you say coming in, because if it comes in, it could come relatively quickly, hopefully not too quick, but in a sense that if a special meeting is called, we'll definitely want to make sure that we have quorum. We were a little bit worried tonight. James, did you want to add something?
I was just going to simply add, Madam Chair, but you covered it off, but there is a council approved work plan with the expectation that the committee will meet on December 7th. There are a series of reports coming forward at that date. So as you mentioned, you're more than capable of calling a special meeting to adjust to the new issues that arose tonight as you deem necessary. Thanks.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Councillor Boehm, you wanted to contribute to that?
Yeah, I was just going to back up exactly what Councillor Oosterhoff just said. Just because with the December meeting being kind of year end, it's usually got a bunch of reports as you mentioned that come. So I'm almost thinking that just because of the substantial nature of these and the effect that and the engagement we'll have from the rural community, it kind of behooves us to likely have our own meeting for them, just because the December meeting could already be relatively full, and it you can do with some of these is rush them in a sense, just because you get meeting fatigue or something like that. So I mean, like Councillor Strauss' point was bang on. Like if we can look at maybe kind of everybody keep in their mind sometime in November to call maybe a special meeting if depending on how things develop. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely in agreement with what you're saying. Also knowing that 2 business items took an hour and 40 minutes tonight. So certainly we don't want an agenda that's too packed. So let's keep the December 7th meeting, and with the projecting and forecasting that we will call a special meeting sometime between October and November. So just be ready and on your feet for when that happens. All right. Okay. So I believe that we can adjourn this meeting. Do we have someone to move the motion to adjourn this meeting? Councillor Boehm, anyone to second? John Wernham, thank you. So I believe all those in favor of adjournment of the meeting. Excellent, all in favor. Thank you very much. And we'll chat in emails to determine if there's a special meeting being called. Otherwise, December 7th. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.